This is the building block, the basic structure or piece of my work is this. Everything stems from this matrix. So I didn't invent the concept of core issues. No one knows who invented it. Pia Mellody is often credited with kind of core issues work. And I was trained, well, it's a long story, but I ended up working at a facility in Mississippi called Pine Grove Behavioral Health, and I redid their substance abuse and eating disorder programs because I was this, when I was younger, I was very good at, I'm still good at it, but it was kind of unusual. I was very good at designing programs, especially for substance abuse. This is not a normal thing at all. And so I would get headhunted by different organizations, and I'd go to hospitals and write programs and train staff and stuff. But I was really young. I was like 27, 28, 29. So when I was 29, I went and did this in Mississippi, and they had this little family program that they did, and they wanted me to look at that too. And in there was this concept of core issues, and a lot of it was Pia Mellody's work. And I was like, this is kind of really important, and this is something that I think would make a big difference. So I built a program for them. That program they only wanted pieces of, and the program you're doing, like what you're doing now, is what they didn't want. Because I took some of her work, I took some other people's work, I took my own ideas about things, and created a new thing out of that. So it's not like I made up the whole thing. I just built upon it, and there are some significant changes. Also, what I developed was an application, because there was no application, in my opinion, for work around core issues. They were using traditional psychotherapeutic methods and principles applied to something that I thought was better than that. And so there was no real-world application of what was developed. Like you would get to the end of a book, for example, by Pia Mellody, to be like, yeah, just talk to your therapist about it. And I'm like, no. And so then I ended up I hired someone to come in and do some trainings that had actually been trained by Pia, and then my boss at the hospital had worked directly with her. So I kind of got a lot of good information about how things worked, what didn't, and then that led me to develop this matrix, which then I built the application components, which is the correction stuff you guys are going to learn, that goes with it. So maybe too much information, but just to give you an idea of where all this came from and how it was developed. I didn't like invent a wheel, maybe I made the wheel better in my opinion, okay? And application is important. That's what I don't like about therapy, and that's why I don't practice therapy anymore, because there was no real application. It's a lot of talking and insight, and then there wasn't a way to resolve the issues. I kind of found it a little cruel, to be honest with you. Kind of exacerbate people and then be like, well, go figure it out. That's what it seemed like to me, and I was good at it, and I still felt like that's what I was doing. So I made something new, and that's what you guys are learning how to do, okay? So this matrix, the things across the top, well, let me just start by writing it up here, and then we'll just talk about it. This marker is rounded. It doesn't have like a edge. So these are a little different than I'm used to. So my writing's going to be even worse than normal. And it's not ever good, okay? So you'll just have to tell me and I'll try to make it better. But it's a weird one. So I'm all wah, 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 wah. Yeah, it's about as understandable as most adults are anyway. So these over here, these are the 4 core issues. So essentially, everything that happens out there, everything that you experience, can be distilled down into these 4 little things. In other words, these 4 core issues are at the core of every person. It's only these 4 things. It's not a bunch of other stuff. I know it sounds like bullshit, but you're going to have to see as we go through this, and when you see application, you may become a little convinced. But essentially, these are up for grabs every minute of every day. So whether you're by yourself, whether you're interacting with other people, whether you're sitting on the toilet, whether you're doing whatever you're doing, these 4 core things are kind of up for grabs, meaning they're undecided. And how we tend to filter information is along these 4 core issues. So essentially, at any given time, what's kind of up for you at a deep level is, what am I worth in this moment? How worthy am I? How valuable am I in this moment? What's my worth right now? This one is about safety. So am I physically safe in this moment? Am I emotionally safe in this moment? Safety is paramount for a human. It's probably the most primary one. But essentially, that's what in a nutshell, safety is about. Am I emotionally or physically safe right now? Okay? This issue of perfection, this is about being a human. There's no such thing as perfection, which I'll talk about more in a minute. It's just a theory, an idea. It doesn't actually exist on this plane of existence. There's no such thing as perfect. Nothing in nature is perfect. Nothing on this plane of existence is perfect. You can take a perfect flower, looks perfect to you, and if you fold it on its center axis or its x-axis, you will notice that one petal is always larger, one is always smaller. There's always a dot on one side, it's not on another. It literally does not exist. It is a made-up thing that humans use and hold themselves against, this perfect standard. So this issue of perfection is actually just about being a human. And it also is about whether you're able or unable to do things. Okay? You with me so far? Because I'm talking fast. I can slow down if you want. All right?
Brent?
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, you're here to interrupt.
Okay, great. So I get the worth and safety about what I am in this moment. Mm-hmm. How would you phrase that in the context of perfection?
Well, and I'm going to get more in detail, but within perfection, it's am I able or unable to do something?
Ability.
It requires an action, an ability. Yes.
Or capability.
Capability, ability. It's an action-oriented thing. So the issue of worth, which we're going to get into all these details so you have more to work with in conversation. Worth doesn't require an action. You just are a certain worthiness in a given moment. This issue of perfection is more about your ability to do something or capability. It informs whether you feel worthy or not, but they're a separate issue.
Thank you.
It's good. It's very good. All right, and then you have this issue of needs. And this is what do I need and want in this moment? The thing about these 4 core issues is they're at the core of you, and then they get triggered. So these are the 4 core issues. Across the top are what are known as ego states. So I did not invent the concept of ego states. It was this marriage family therapist guy, a theorist, and his name was Byrne, B-Y-R-N-A, and he had this little theory about B-Y-R-N-E, excuse me. He had this little theory that everyone learns in psych grad school. And basically, it's like, if I'm in a parent place with my wife, and she's in a child place, then we're not going to meet each other. That was the whole theory. And it's taught in every psychology school in the Western world. And I don't know why, it's just this little blurb, but I was really obsessed with it when I was a graduate student. And I was like, oh, this is so interesting. And I would talk about it all the time. People were like, zip it, we're so sick of hearing about this. Like, can't you talk about something else? Now I started to understand why I was obsessed with it back then when I developed this. So essentially, these ego states, the best way to think of them is that they're a filter. Like, so stuff happens out here, and you have a sensory system that interprets that information. Depending on what kind of a filter you have on, this ego state filter, you're going to interpret that information in very particular ways. So it's like a filtering device, essentially, and it's about right here, and you filter information in very specific ways as a result along these 4 core issues. All right? So let me further explain as I go along. So hopefully it'll make a lot more sense. So basically, this child ego state, notice it's called wounded child. It's a wounded child. So I already mentioned to you that your parents are not able to meet all of your needs. Surprise, it's not possible. And we develop a woundedness as actual children. I mean, this is like what happens when you are age 0 to about 6, okay? So this wounded child state correlates to 0 to 6 years old. Within that time frame, you have enough of your needs not being met that every single human develops this kind of woundedness filter, this wounded experience on the inside. It's to run interference for the wounded child, but it's kind of weird in that around the age of 7, around 7 for most people, can be kind of 6, could be 8, but around the age of 7, we develop this part of ourselves that just shows up, and that's called the teen. This teen part is trying to meet the needs of the child, trying to meet the needs that were unmet. It's this part that we create that then goes out there, and I think we're okay for now. Thank you. I think we're okay. Thanks. Basically, this teen part develops to go meet the needs that were unmet by the parent. So you have this wounded child on board. That's who you actually are at those ages. And then around the age of 7 or so, this other part just shows up. And it's like, I know what to do. I'm going to go do things in a different way. The reality is that it's being done in an opposite way, which I'll explain in a minute. It's like a polar response, it's like a reaction. But that is the reason that it forms, is to basically meet those needs. So you kind of essentially have an experience of, well, I'm on my own in a way, and this isn't super conscious for people, but I'm hoping to make it conscious for you now, that everybody went through this. So you develop this teenage part, hold on one second, and that part I call adapted teen. The reason it's called adapted teen is it's how an adult, how a teenager thinks an adult would act. Okay? How a teenager thinks an adult would act, and that is the adapted teen, and that's going to correlate to 7 to 17 years of age. It doesn't mean that you, at 17, you're no longer in a teen place, or even in a child place. I'm just helping you to understand kind of developmentally where it fits. But it's not a developmental model, okay? It's just around those ages, you're really in a teen place. And as I go through what the teen is, you should be able to recognize it, okay? Dan?
So a few minutes ago, or about a minute ago, you said, I'll show up and do things differently. However, the adaptive team is doing things wrong. Is that what you said?
It's not wrong, it's extreme. It's an opposite place, it's an opposite reaction.
To the wound, correct?
It's to compensate. It's a compensation. It's also called your defense structure. So
that was the distinction I wanted to make, because earlier you said opposite, but now you're saying extreme. So
well, it is opposite, and it is extreme in that it's opposite. Like it's one extreme to the other. Let me show you what I mean. But let me show you what I mean. So if I'm in a child place around my worth, my worth, my worthiness, then I feel less than other people, less than you in a given moment. So something occurs, something happens out here, and basically I feel small and less than you. So I'm down here and you're up there, okay? It's a less than. It's technically like a less than human. I am unworthy, essentially. Because if you're on the planet, you're worthy. That's the adult state. But the teen shows up and says, oh, no. You're not less than. You're better than other people. You're not less than. You are better than. And that's what I mean when I say it's an opposite or a polar state. It's an extreme version. And so this is kind of how it works, essentially. So you have the less than going on, and then the teen shows up with the better than. But we don't always know that we have the less than going on. Most people in this room, people that gravitate towards groups like this, they're actually more in a teen place, and they can identify with that better. But I want you to know the whole reason why there's even a better than going on is because there's a less than deeper. It's like the child's down here, the teen's on top, and then you're supposed to be developing this adult state I'll get into that manages both of those. And that's what you're learning how to do in this work, is manage this child and teen parts. Okay?
Have you seen a better than state happen without there being the underlying wounded child?
Nope. So in other words, it's a great question though. So the thing is it may be occluded from you what the less than is, or that you're even in a less than. Because see, the child is like here, and the teen is like over the child. Like there's a woundedness, and he's like, I got it. And so you can't always access the child. So a lot of times you'll become aware that you're in a teen place. When you apply a correction to a teen thing, like you're trying to move the teen out of the way, the child shows up more. Like in other words, you correct and you move the teen over, and then all of a sudden you're going to have a lot more access to that less than. So it can actually create a little uncomfortability at first, because you kind of work with yourself on the teen and you try to get him out of the way, out of the driver's seat, and then your child shows up and you're like, whoa, what the hell is this? I thought this was supposed to make me feel better. I feel a little worse. But then you apply correction to the child too. And then you fully resolved it.
Yeah, so this is going to be a series of questions. So I'm assuming one wound as a child can lead to multiple teen actions, correct?
One wound can lead to a lot of things. There's an original wound,
Yes.
and then there's wounding on top of that. But yes, the teen's going to respond to any one of those.
It might create a lot of different teen actions at one time that you did get picked up from elementary school or whatever.
Exactly.
It can lead to a lot of things.
Along these 4 core issues. Like in other words, you're saying it leads to a lot of other things, but what it does is it leads to things around these 4.
Is there any cross-category pollination
Okay, so here's the thing. You're learning about all of these as if they're these very distinct things. And they are distinct, but think of it as 4 threads that make up one piece of yarn. So they all inform each other. These 4 core issues inform one another, which is a little bit more advanced, frankly. Like, this is an intro, but it doesn't matter. We can still talk about it. I'm just saying they actually all impact each other, but we work with them individually because that's the only way that I was able to figure out how to do it. And it works really well to just focus on one at a time. But when you make a change in any of them, it actually changes the other ones too, within the same context that you're working within. So in other words, let's say you're triggered by something at work, and it's around perfection, and you change that, it's going to impact these other ones as well, especially when it comes to work. So doing one correction actually does impact all the other ones. It'll kind of soften them, if you will. But, you know, I'm not getting into all this right now, but you always do worth last. Because worth is actually, think of worth as like a pincushion. It's like the primal one. And then the other ones stick in to it. So,
You mean safety, perfection, and needs?
yes, safety, perfection, and needs kind of stick in worth. Because worth, when you make a change in the other ones, it actually impacts the worth. It either it increases it, basically, because you're acting in ways that are esteeming to the self. It's the only way to build worth. So I'm going to say that again. The only way to increase worth is to act in ways that are esteeming to the self.
Esteeming?
That show value to the self, care and concern for yourself. So if I'm in a child place around my worth, I'm less than you, and I'm down here, and I'm a piece of shit, okay? If I'm in a teen place around my worth, I'm not less than you, I'm better than you, and you're a piece of shit, all right? If I'm in an adult place around my worth, I am equal to you. So I'm not saying that to be nice. I'm not saying that you're supposed to be everyone's equal. Don't be mean. I'm not saying that. I'm telling you that's the truth. I believe in God, and I don't think that he makes mistakes. So if you're here, you're supposed to be here. If you were not worthy to be on the planet, you wouldn't have come into the planet. You wouldn't be here. But you're here, so therefore you're worthy. Where we get off and kind of skewed or triggered is that we think that we're less than other people or better than other people. And that's what we learn how to do, is to identify whenever you're in one of these boxes, which I haven't even filled out yet. What you learn how to do is identify when you're in one of these, and then you apply correction to move you over back to the adult state. Okay, so that's the name of the game. It's not like you're going to become a functional adult in all ways and it's a fixed thing. Different contexts trigger you in different ways that causes you to bounce into the child and teen along those 4 core issues. And then we apply correction to move you back over. The beauty of correction, though, is that whenever you have removed the mental and emotional block that's actually causing you to bounce into child and teen, it's no longer there. So you are less triggered over time, generally speaking, in all areas, not just in the area that you applied your correction to. So that's a nice byproduct. I did not know that when I made it up. Because don't forget, I made it up, okay? I'm not going to act like I didn't. And I didn't know that it would do that. But it's a wonderful gift in that when you do one correction, it impacts lots of things. These other ones, it also is a way for you to kind of get really a lot better and less triggered over time. Because if it's removing what's causing the problem, then there's no symptom, there's no problem to fix. Does that make sense? Okay, very good. So let's go down to safety and kind of see what that looks like. So if I'm in a child place around my safety, then I am all kinds of exposed. I am exposed. In other words, I'm not making any safety for myself. I'm a little dot, because I can't draw. You're a little dot. And everything that happens out there goes right in here and makes a big feeling or a big thought or a big reaction. There's no way to protect yourself from the environment, essentially. And so everything goes right in there, makes a big feeling, and then we puke that feeling back up. We then just puke it up. This is a highly reactive type of state. It's normal, right, because there's only 4 core issues and 3 ego states, for every human to move into an area of exposure depending on what happens. But it's a very uncomfortable state to be in. So as a result of the exposure, of us feeling exposed, the teen shows up and is like, oh no, you're not exposed. I'm going to shut this shit down. And so basically, you close right up. So instead of being exposed, you become closed.
Can you give a specific example about exposed?
Sure. Let me finish this really quick and then yes. So basically, you're a little dot, and instead of like flapping in the wind, being exposed and emotionally volatile, you build a wall around yourself. And you're going to have a whole segment on this, by the way. We have a couple of hours just on boundaries. This issue is actually about boundaries. And so we're going to devote some time to creating those for you so that you have some boundaries and can better mitigate this. But essentially, this wall feels pretty good at first because you're not as emotionally volatile. It feels better. It feels safer, right? But the problem is that nothing gets in there because you're all walled off. And the real problem is nothing gets out. So essentially, you feel safer, but you're isolated. And so thoughts of loneliness increase, darker feelings increase.
Sorry,
I guess you can relate. Yeah, and that's great. No, let it, I'm not, I can be somewhat formal, but I'm not, like, we're here to talk about stuff. So let it do whatever it needs to be, okay? So exposed, highly reactive, closed, less reactive, more comfortable, but it's not very functional. It's somewhat functional, but not as functional as it could be. What is the most functioning is this functional adult state, which I didn't mention to you that actually it's called the functional adult because it's actually a higher functioning state. It's not a chronological adult state. Anybody can be a chronological adult. That only requires you to be 17 or over, but this is a functional adult, okay?
What was that you said again? Because it what?
I don't know.
You said it's functional because, higher state.
Because it is, you're right, to differentiate between chronological adult and functional adult, okay? So if I'm in an adult place around my safety, I'm not flapping in the wind and all exposed. I'm also not all closed off from everybody and everything. I can do this wonderful thing where I can protect and contain myself. So I can protect my reality from yours. In other words, have my own thoughts and feelings about things that aren't always impacted by everybody else. And I can also contain myself in a reasonable way instead of over-containing. This is over-containing, and this is under-protection. The adult can be more in the middle, which is protecting, containing of yourself. So that looks like this. I'm a little dot, but I build a nice buffer around myself. This buffer is called healthy boundaries, and that's why you're going to learn about boundaries. And this enables you to slow things down as they're coming in. So instead of having huge reactions to things, you can recognize the reactivity is starting, work with yourself in the way I'm going to teach you, and then you can slow it down so that you basically aren't as reactive. But it also has, these holes also allow you to kind of let things come out. But you get to choose when, how much, the level of intensity, all these other things become a choice. And that's what happens in this area whenever you move back over into this adult place around safety. Yes? And then I'll get you.
When you're talking about protecting, contained, and talking about slowing down things or the negativity coming at you, will that when you get into it more in detail, will that help deal with like toxic people?
Yes. Yes,
And
absolutely.
gaslighting and all that kind of stuff.
Absolutely, because the thing is if you have a way to basically keep it from going all the way in, then that changes your ability to understand what's happening in relation to those people, and then also maybe even encourage you to give feedback or make changes around those relationships. Or maybe it means you just get rid of those people. I'm not telling you that that's what you should do. I'm just saying it gives you the choice of like how you would deal with it. But a healthy boundary system is required to relate. And most people don't have it at all. Their thoughts and feelings, somebody else's thoughts and feelings become their own. They don't know what they're thinking and feeling. They just kind of take on somebody else's. You read something and you're like, that's the truth for me now. It's like, well, wait a minute. What do you think and feel about what this person is saying? What do you think and feel about what I'm saying, by the way? It's, this is just my ideas, my opinions, my reality. I'm sharing it with you because that's what I'm meant to do, frankly. But it's up to you to decide what the hell you want to do with it. I don't need you to do anything with it. That's the beauty of boundaries. Okay? And that's a different way to operate in the world. You can say whatever you want to say as long as it's not overtly offensive, right? Like it's still contained. And then you let the chips fall where they may. Because you cannot make up other people's realities all the time, and that's what all of us are doing. And it's exhausting. And it doesn't work. So I'll get into real depth about boundaries. Like we're really going to get in there and you're going to develop a system and we're going to learn all about it. Okay, I promise you will do that while you're here. In fact, it's probably the most important thing you're going to learn while you're here, believe it or not, is the boundary stuff. Because it changes everything when you have some. Life's kind of difficult when you don't have any. Okay? It's a great question. Now, Sterling, what did you ask me?
I was just asking for a concrete example of exposed, because I'm the guy that, like, as soon as I have some perceived wrong against me, I'll just banish you from everything.
Yeah.
So I'm super clued in on the closed.
There's an exposure happening first, and you just talked about what it was, which can be your example, is that when you feel like you've been wronged in some way. And so what happens is that you're actually operating kind of bouncing into the closed and exposed. So the root of it is actually exposed. And so you do have an exposed little boy in there. Sometimes things go right into him, and then it feels like it's been wronged. In other words, you may move into a less than as a result of what occurs, or a defective. This is at a deeper level. We haven't gotten to the defective yet, but you may move into that. And then that's why your team would then banish them. So there's no like wiggle room. It's like I'm hurt, and so then it's like I got to shut it down.
So is the exposed, like an example of that could be just, I'll just speak for myself, like
That'd be good.
you're supposed to completely trust your parents or your father or whatever, and then they do something that's completely
Fucked up.
and out of left field, so you're like, this trust has just completely been shattered.
And especially with like a parent, like the way little kids are designed and we're designed as humans is to trust, because that's how we know we're okay by the parents, and that's why those are especially violating. Okay. But that would be a good example of that kind of experience would create an exposure, but also there was an exposure to begin with that even occurred. In other words, that it impacted you so greatly. But we're talking about a parent. So the example you used is a little bit, it's almost impossible to build up a nice buffer when you're a kid, especially with a parent. Kids don't have boundaries. It doesn't serve their ability to learn. You learn through modeling. It's like 80% of how a human learns is what's modeled. In other words, not what's told, but what you feel and see the parents doing. And it doesn't work to have boundaries as a kid. You're not designed to have them because of modeling. Otherwise, modeling wouldn't work. So there's a lot of evolutionary components into how we are now and how people are and how these things form. But you can feel exposed about anything. Anytime you feel raw and vulnerable, or you're worried about something and you're afraid, you're exposed. And so what we learn how to do is to go and get that little boy and talk to him about the fact that he's exposed. And then that is the way that we become not exposed. We move back into protecting and containing by working with your kids, by working with your child and teen. Because it's the only way that I could figure out for people to do anything good for themselves. Because you can tell people, right, like, oh, well, you should stop hanging out with that person. Or you should go exercise. Yes, I know that. But how do you go then do that? And so this is a way of like, hey, how do I make that happen instead of trying to force myself to do something? It becomes kind of natural. It's weird. It feels natural when you make changes at this level. So, do you want any other examples of exposed?
No, I'm getting it.
Makes sense? Does that make sense to everybody else?
Well, like I feel like, because I had like, say when I was like 19, where I had like my heart broken, and then at that point, like completely went the other way with it, where I had a racket where I told myself I can't do what I want to do in my career and have a relationship, and then getting...
Sounds familiar to me.
Well, and then like making it true, you know, and then like
Yes.
having evidence behind it. Because it's like, and I really relate to how you said it's like extreme. Like I'm wondering why I've had so much extreme reactions, but I know that now it's like I'm coming from a team place.
Yes.
And I get it's a pull, it's just the opposite. I don't want that to happen again, so I'm gonna do that. I know if I do the complete opposite, that won't happen.
Exactly.
It's true.
And
but
that
it's
is
not functional.
It isn't, and it's also very much like a teen state, right? It's like, oh, well, I'm just never gonna do that again. I'm just gonna do the opposite. But that's a really common experience. I mean, the first heartbreak that people have is very heartbreaking because it's all this, basically you think you're gonna get all this stuff from your parents that they weren't able to do is what's happening at a deeper level. That's why people even enter into a relationship, frankly, is they're finally going to get what they didn't get from their parents. And that's the infatuation stage of courtship and of love relationship. And basically it's like, oh, unconsciously your child is like super excited because he's finally going to get the witness and approval that he did not get or she did not get. And so then it's like, here comes this person that's going to give all that to me, and that's why and I just know it. I'm in love, right? And that's what it's going to be. Turns out that they can't actually give you that stuff because only your parents could give it to you, and they only had between 0 and 17. So it's over. You're not going to get that stuff, okay? You're not going to get it. You're not going to get it from that person. What this is about is learning how to give it to yourself so that you don't just shut down or get all exposed again. You have a way to kind of titrate it, because that other person is not going to be able to do that for you because it's impossible. It is literally impossible. And that's what we all want. And then we have our first heartbreak. And then some of us have multiple heartbreaks. I did, where I just wasn't getting it because I was too damaged, frankly. I had no way to know that I was trying to get what I wanted. I mean, the big clue was that I wanted to be a therapist. If you want to be a therapist, you're crazy. Like, people that want to be therapists are off. Like, you're trying to figure yourself out, all right? And I say that as a licensed clinician for many years. Both your parents are therapists?
And my dad's a minister.
Oh, Sterling. No wonder you developed an alcohol. No wonder you developed an alcohol problem.
Among others.
Yeah, I know. But I'm just saying, like, for sure. I mean, that's rough. So therapists are nuts. Okay, have a good day. No, I'm just kidding. So therapists are crazy. And basically, it's because they have a bunch of stuff going on, like I did too. And I'm not just speaking I can only speak for myself, but I'm telling you, I've been around this world a long time, as far as therapist world and all that. And essentially, anybody that wants to listen to everybody's problems all day, instead of focusing on their own problems, has a problem. It's really not a normal thing. So then there are those of us that start to understand that and get a lot of our own work done, and then you can become an excellent clinician or a healer, but it's pretty much a shit show for most. Just be really cautious about. You should be a cautious consumer of everything, including me, okay? You should be cautious of everything, but especially therapists, because they have a lot of unresolved stuff.
What does titrate mean?
To reduce or increase, so you're like changing the level of intensity. It's a titration.
That word just grabbed me, and so I got so interested in it that I don't even remember what you were talking about. But my brain's really good at picking up on things that are important. So how did you use the word?
That you need to titrate your reactions to things, and this process affords you that, where you can titrate your reactions, and boundaries does that as well.
Okay.
All right? So yeah, you move from, you got all exposed because you were exposed to begin with, then she breaks your heart or whatever, and then basically you move to closed. And then the goal is to learn how to protect and contain instead, so that we're not just little islands going through life. I mean, I have really had a similar path. I've been talking about it for like a year, but basically I always have prioritized my work, but part of it is because I feel I have a function and a purpose on earth. Like, I actually am someone who's fulfilling my purpose at this time around, which is nice. But as a result, I've always chosen my work over relationship. And so I would have relationships, but wouldn't really be available. And now I'm very available for that and more interested in that. But I had some things I had to do first. And it's just how it goes for most people.
When you were talking about therapists and their challenges, it was bringing up some issues for my stepfather. He and I have no relationship at all. And part of it is when I was a teenager, you know, he was a psychotherapist for many years, but he would always talk about me in the third person when I was in the room. Like, I
Wow.
go over here and like telling me I have a shame-based personality and this, that, and psychoanalyzing me, and I always felt like it was abusive.
It is abusive.
Yeah.
He's not connecting with you on it. It's a way for him to not deal with himself and also not deal with you.
Right.
It's a way to pathologize it and keep it contained away from him.
Yeah.
It's the opposite of good parenting, by the way.
Yeah, well, he sucked at it. But anyway, so interestingly, and I know, just a brief aside, So my mother came to visit me, and I've always had issues with like the whole worthiness of, getting my parents' approval, because I took like the back road, the scenic route to my arrive at where I'm at today.
Mm-hmm.
And
Me too.
the most interesting people I think do. But so she, like, we were just sitting in I figured we're gonna go to Walgreens and just run errands, and she's like, drops the bombshell on me. So, are you ever gonna have a relationship with your stepfather? And I'm at that age where my parents are aging, and I don't talk about uncomfortable stuff with them because I don't want to burden them or stress them out at their age.
Okay.
But at the same time, I'm like sitting there grabbing my steering wheel, like, talk about this now. And I said, well, I'm gonna be honest, like, Mom, I don't want to hurt you, but no.
Good for you.
And I felt like, once again, the thing that pissed me off so much, not that she asked me the question, was that he was indirectly manipulating me, trying to manipulate me through my mother, that it's my job to have this relationship with him. And I've always said, children are like banks. You can't collect interest on investments you never fucking made.
Mm-hmm.
And I basically told her that, not words because she's my mom, but so I said, I don't want to hurt you, but no, this is, you can't go your entire life telling your stepdaughter this, that, or and basically every interaction we ever had is just criticism.
Right.
And then expect my job to have a fucking relationship with you. Go fuck yourself.
Exactly, and it makes sense. I mean, you should be pissed about it because essentially it's supposed to be the opposite. It's supposed to be the opposite way. Your parents' job or step-parents or any of your caregiver's job is to meet the needs of that child. And if you don't want to meet the needs of that child, in other words, connect with them and help them to do things and basically witness and approve of them, then you shouldn't have any kids because that's the job. That is the job. It's not your job to then have a relationship with this parent. It's the parent's job to have a relationship with you and to witness and approve. So that's all that kids want. That's all that you want at all. I want it all anybody wants. And it's all you want as an adult right now. You want to be seen and you want to be approved of. That's all. That's it. It's actually why you do all the things you do and don't do until you learn how to step out of that, heal yourself a little bit more, and then you don't have to try to get that from other people. But he was never willing to give you that.
No, never did.
And it is not your responsibility to then all of a sudden go help him out.
Yeah.
It's for him, and has nothing to do with you. And your mom's confused.
Yeah.
So I agree with you. It's not your job to make it all better because he doesn't like it.
Yeah.
Well, then maybe you should have been a little more connected and kind of been more of a parent. That's just how it works. It doesn't mean you can't form a relationship as an adult. And as you resolve what you did not get from him and from your mom, you may be surprised that you can then tolerate him because you're not kind of pulling on him or looking for him to give you things he never could give you. And then we're not even as mad about it anymore. It's like, well, that's who that guy is. But that takes some work. But you'll have a framework here, and then you'll have a way to work with yourself, not because you have to work on your relationship with your stepdad. I'm just saying you'll have the tools if you decided to apply it to that area. The other thing is, and this is getting a little ahead, is that when we build a correction, we always have this piece that's historical data, is what I call it, and that's like where it originated from. It usually involves one of the parents. So doing that and kind of building into those corrections, it actually changes a lot of stuff about your parents at the same time. And so, like my dad is not very relational at all. And so basically it was my job to maintain the relationship when I became an adult. And so he would never call, he would never do anything. And then he'd be mad at me that I wasn't doing my job, which was to stay engaged with him. And even though I didn't understand a lot of things, by the age of 23, I was like, I had a conversation with him and I was like, I'm not gonna do this anymore. I'm not totally responsible for this. And it wasn't as nice and neat, as clean as this. I was kind of yelling at him about it. But I was like, I'm not gonna do this anymore. Do you know that it took him 2 years to call me? 2 years. 2 years. And then he called me out of the blue, and it was like a normal conversation. Within that 2-year time period, I had gotten a little therapy, even started to develop some of this. And by the time he called, I didn't need him in that way anymore. I had moved away from his job is to witness and approve of me, and I want to get this from him. And I didn't need it anymore. I even think that's why he even called, is that it was almost an energetic thing. And he's like, oh, he's not pulling on me anymore to give him this stuff that I'm not capable of doing. He is not capable. I believe he's even willing, but incapable. So then he called, and I think we had a conversation about, like, I don't know, anything. I don't remember what it was. This was a long time ago. It's 20 years ago. But it was something like just benign, and it was like we had talked the day before. And I was able to do that because I didn't have all this gook in there trying to make it not be that way. And from that moment forward, I was able to accept him for who he was. Really. And it was very freeing. And then he could be a part of my life, but he's not ever going to be what maybe I wanted him to be. But he is who he is. And now we have all kinds of conversations about, taxes and like whatever. Like, once I kind of moved into, frankly, when I started to become successful, my father all of a sudden paid more attention. Because those are things that he could understand. People are people. And so if you don't need it from them anymore, you can just accept them for they are. And now I would say we have a good relationship. Is it really deep? No. How would that happen? That's not who he is. Do I love him? Yes. Does he love me? Yeah. But it has limits. There's a lot of limits in the one with your stepdad. So it's just kind of like, all right. So like the mental and emotional blocks, they really are blocks. They're like these energetic blocks made up of feelings, and they're in the energy channels of the body. And it makes you vibrate a certain way, essentially. And whenever your vibration changes, this is a kind of a woo way to talk about what I do. There's also a very Western way to talk about it that I feel compelled to say more woo-woo right now. But basically, like, your resonance changes, and then you attract different things in the same people around you. It's weird. But it does happen. Most of life is unseen. It's actually not seen and focused on what you're saying to people. It's how it feels,
How do you protect and contain? Because I had a very similar experience with my dad, where there was a lot of stuff that came around to get to the point of like, this is just going to be what it is, and that's okay. And that was good for a few years, and then recently, there's just another.
Because it's basically what happened is you compartmentalized it because you got fatigued. And I don't blame you. This is healthy. Your defense system was like, I'm never going to get this from him. Just forget it. But this little boy in there still wants that stuff. And so what happens is that little boy gets triggered, and you've had some triggering experiences now, like whatever it is that you're going to say about what's happened recently. But it's because it's not been fully resolved that it comes back. Whenever it's more resolved, which I would not tell you this and show you something if I didn't know that it would resolve it. I'll tell you that right now, okay? But when it's resolved, then you don't get re-triggered. And if you do, it's like real small. Like you're like, oh yeah, there's that, oh yeah, I remember this crap. I'm not gonna go there. So it was compartmentalized and it hasn't been fully healed. And that's why it's triggered. Yes, Chad.
Most of the issues I have with core word issues of less than seem to originate in my teen years. Is that a possibility, or is that just my wounded child filtering through it at that time?
It's not that you don't develop wounding once you're out of like the actual 0 to 5, but there actually were probably wounds that are before then, when you were little, that you just don't have access to.
Right.
But the thing is in correction, you would still correct what you know. So you would still be working with your child even if that incident occurred in your teen years, because that child is in there.
Yeah.
So
That makes me think there's things I'm not quite seeing in the 0 to 6 period.
Oh yeah,
that
I'm
cause
sure.
that.
And there are. And so those things can become uncovered even with just having a framework. Like it's already got you thinking like maybe there's something else. And so those incidents would come up as a part of the work. Like as you're doing the corrections and stuff, you will start to gain more access to what maybe occurred before. But you're never wasting your time at any point of doing a correction, you don't have to always go, what's the original wound? You just start with what you know, and you just go there. But then it'll deepen over time. So like, you do corrections, and you're focusing on these teen years, but what you're doing is you're kind of peeling back layers, because you're actually shaving emotional blocks. Think of like a big block of ice, and you do a correction and you shave a chunk off. So it deepens. You get deeper and deeper. And then basically you go as deep as you want to go, and then you may not want to go any deeper. And that's fine. Like, I mean, I am no longer, I've been doing this for a long time now, like with myself. Remember, I made it for me. But I will keep going to a level of depth, and then I'll like back off sometimes, where I'm like, I don't need to go that deeper right now. I don't want to. So because it becomes too hot and triggery, or I'm just tired, or I have other things to do, or I don't want to, or my teen shows up and shuts it down. There's a variety of reasons. But then usually I'll go back and go deeper. I'm only sharing that with you because I want you to know that you can utilize this however you want. If you do any level of it, it will help you, right? If you get really into it and you make lots of corrections and really get into the work, you have profound levels of change because you go deeper and deeper and deeper. Like why I've been seeing Lynn as long as I have, which is like unusual. It has to do with his starting point and kind of like where he started with. But the thing is that he wants to go deeper and deeper and deeper. And at this point, he has reached a level of like, it's not a plateau, but it's a bit of a plateau level of like all the different things he needs to do or different changes, because he's resolved enough of it at this point. For some people, that's a year. Some people, that's 2 years. And you're not working with me privately, but I'm saying you do the work on your own, and you have a way to do that. So it's not a requirement that you go as deep as possible. You're already pretty damn deep if you're even looking at anything like this.
Can I add something? Sure. The other thing about this stuff is it affects the filter you view the world with. Like a girl a few months ago didn't want to have a lunch with me and sent a text about that. Well, I immediately kick in to piss off. I make up all these stories in my head, but I'm aware enough at this point. I'm like, oh, that's my teen showing up. So I kind of talk to him and chill that out a little bit because I know there's a little bit child over there. So I kind of sort it out, and then I look back at the text message. And I've made up all this shit she didn't even say in my head. And it wasn't even, so like, maybe you're like pushing people away or like cutting bait with them. Sometimes they may not even be betraying you as much as you think they are.
But it's real for you.
That.
And that's what you're saying, is it's real, and your reality is valid. I mean, that's your reality. But as you kind of clean up some of those original wounds that have nothing to do with the person that's in front of you. And that's kind of what you're talking about, right? Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
So when you do the work and make the correction to address the original wound, right? Mm-hmm. Issue resolved. Will that issue occur again in the future, or?
So if it's a complete resolution, then no. That I can't guarantee, and that's more rare. It's usually about half. Like you get about half of it out. And so then it will show up again, but it's very small. Like in other words, it's not like that kind of a trigger anymore. It's like, oh, here's that thing. And so then you do what I call remind. So you would remind your child or teen, because you're going to develop a relationship with these parts of yourselves. You remind that teen, hey, remember? And you can read them back the correction, or you can just remember I got this. So it reduces the charge no matter what. If there's no charge reduction, then we've done something wrong in the correction. That's literally how implicitly I trust this process now, because it's just been so many years and so many clients. So either I've made a mistake in how I showed you how to, like the content that goes in the correction, or you've missed something. Because you should feel something occur, a shift, where it actually goes down. You can physically almost feel it. But I can't guarantee you 100% resolution, because I didn't even think that was possible. Like that's just to me, that was a fluke at first. I was like, wow, this person just is no longer overeating. And all we did is one correction. That must not be real. That's what I thought. Even though I made it, I was like, I don't know about this. But sometimes you correct at a deep enough level and it just goes. So then whatever symptom you're having, you don't have anymore. Symptoms are like relational problems, depression, anxiety, perfectionism, whatever you want to call it. I view those as symptoms and not actual problems. The problem is down here. The symptom is how you're responding. And so in psychology, it's all about symptoms. You treat symptoms, and we call them disorders, and then you treat those. But what happens is you can make change in that area, in that symptom, but a new symptom will show up, or one that exists gets worse. So in other words, that's when I started to realize that I was plugging holes. Like, I'm like, wait a minute, this person's depression's better, now they're a gambling addict. What? Like, just literally, I mean, stuff like that. And I was like, what in the world is going on? So if it's at the root and you get enough out, sometimes you can get lucky. I mean, I have ones that have totally gone, clients it happens, but I don't want you to think that's what's supposed to happen all the time. You should get a reduction. Anything between 20% and above is enough of a reduction of the triggering that you should be able to handle the situation better when it shows up again. Like, you've already cleaned it up. So like, you have reactions to things, and then you can apply this work to clean that up. And then instead of going to people with fix my problem, fix my feelings that you're not even responsible for in the first place, but you need to fix these damn things, you've already taken care of it. And so then your relationships become very different. You actually start just sharing with people what happened, as opposed to go fix it. You're like, listen, I want you to know when you said this, I thought this about myself, and I had these feelings, and I just want you to know. And they're like, what? The fuck was that? Literally, it's like, huh? Like, they're like, okay. What? Like, I don't know what to do with this. And it's like, you don't need to do anything. I manage me, and but I want to be known. I want you to know me, and I want to know you, so I'm just going to share with you what occurred. And then if that person does actually really care about you, by the way, they don't want you to be hurting, and they'll avoid that behavior without you asking them to do it, because you don't need it anymore. That's the thing about this plane of existence. When you don't need it anymore, it's offered to you. It's such a weird thing. This whole life thing is really weird.
Is that a boundary?
Is what a boundary?
Is that what you just said, like, the fact that you're telling them that how you felt about something?
Yeah, that actually is, that's sharing, but you are showing that you have boundaries.
Right.
Specifically, setting a boundary is like a little different.
You can't expect people to know your boundaries.
Not if you don't tell them what they are.
Exactly, so that's like what that is.
That is an example of a sophisticated boundary setting,
Right.
to answer your question. That would be very sophisticated, as opposed to like, hey, when you do this thing, I don't like it, and so don't do that anymore. That's a boundary too.
Right.
But, you know.
Earlier you said psychological disorders are symptoms, and I just wanted to ask of what?
Of bouncing into the child and teen along these 4 core issues. The root of the problem is here. The symptom is what people are acting out, how they're acting out. But in the Western world, those symptoms are called the problem.
Right, I get it.
And then they're attacked. Try to fix them.
I think the distinction I was looking for is their root problem, their symptoms of worth, safety, protection, and needs, or of traumas against worth, safety, protection.
So worth, safety, perfection, and needs are just givens. And then because of our less than nurturing or traumas, we bounce into the child and teen along these 4 core things. That is what creates the symptoms that clustered together create what psychologists call disorders.
Okay.
So,
I'm just curious about something. Is
Yeah.
it, like, I guess it's impossible, or there's never been a person that had, like, even if, you know, somebody.
I don't know, ask, maybe there has been.
Yeah, well, like, but like earlier you said, like, my stepdad sucked at being a parent. Like, so if someone's just the best parent that's ever lived, like, I mean, that exists.
Yeah.
Right? Like, right now there is a best parent that's ever lived that did fulfill a lot of worth, safety, perfection, and needs.
Those people have less symptomology. In other words, there are people that get more of what they want and need. They get more witnessing and more approval. But it's impossible to get all of it. There's always some less than nurturing, because this isn't a perfect plane. It doesn't exist.
Doesn't it create the other pathology where you have, like, this is like where narcissism comes in, right? That we have deficient attention, or it's over-nurturing and over-protection?
Yeah, overprotection and over-nurturing can create somewhat of a narcissism, because that's about the parent and not about the child as an individual. But I don't know what you mean by it creates an opposite.
So like if you provide everything that your child, it's like a snowplow.
Oh yeah.
Provide
But that's
all their
over
needs,
the
they don't
top.
grow.
Right.
They don't meet challenges and they'll fail.
That is actually also a form of abuse. because you're overprotecting and overcontaining. That child develops no sense of agency. You're also failing to witness that that child is a separate entity from you. The reason the parent is overprotecting and all that is because they're trying to manage their fear around that child.
What that says about them, they're clearly a bad parent. if they're child.
Exactly, and that is actually very narcissistic if there's that thinking. That would be more of a narcissistic type parenting. But essentially, they're failing to witness the child. It's like, well, I have to go into your classroom and make sure that everything's okay all the time. That's because they're having a feeling, and they're actually using the child to manage that feeling. And technically, that's called enmeshment. Enmeshment is whenever a parent or authority figure uses the child to meet their own needs. In this case, an emotional need to deal with the fact that they're afraid about their kid or how they're going to perform or whatever, how they're going to make them look.
Because for them, it's a low sense of worth relative to their peer group, right?
It could be. It's definitely going to be stuff on these 4 core issues. Each parent, it depends, but yeah, there is going to be a less than. There's going to be a defective quality. That's why they're trying to be a perfect parent. You know, I'm better than because my kid became a heart surgeon or whatever.
Yeah.
Did you have this flavor of upbringing?
Well, I'm reading Robert Greene's new book, Laws of Human Nature, and I'm in the narcissism chapter, so like there's a bunch of this stuff that's coming up. I actually have a question about boundaries.
Okay.
Like negotiating boundaries between parties, and when there's conflicts, when someone says, no, I'm not changing my behavior, you need to change your response to my behavior. So I've had this. So like, here's a benign example. So, girl in previous story, her name was Jen. One of the several conflicts that we've had is like I can watch all this happen in like a meta state, but sometimes I can't stop myself from like going down the thing. And so it'll be like, let's just say it's during the workday, we have some sort of texting conversation, and I like whatever, I put my phone down and I go back to work. And now I haven't responded, and so she goes into story mode and creates something about what's happening.
Yeah, she's triggered by what she's observing.
Mm-hmm. And then for me, it's like, the reality is like, no, that's not what happened.
Mm-hmm.
And now we have this fight, which is ridiculous because I get into a defensive position where it's like, my phone is not for your convenience, it's for mine. Right? Like, if you want to talk to me, like, we can, but like during the workday, like, I'm not under an obligation to respond to you.
Mm-hmm.
And from her position, it's like, all you had to do was just say, hey, I'm going back to work, I'll talk to you later. Right? It's like very small ask, and I'll get into this defiant state of like, I don't accept that
Right.
boundary. And now we have like this whole boundary conflict.
Well, no, you're having a data debate over what you expect. It's not actually a conversation. You're debating the facts.
Fair
That's
enough.
the first thing. And you can learn how to not do that. But the other thing is like, what you're saying is that you're not ready for that kind of relationship where you do actually go ahead and communicate and say, I'm working right now, blah, 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 blah. That may be a level of need that you're not willing to meet, and that's okay.
Sure.
But I want you to know that like, you're not wrong and she's not wrong.
Right.
What it is that she's needier than you're willing to accommodate. She's being needy in that moment. That's your perception.
Yes.
And she probably is in a needy place, and she's responding from a child place and texting you and saying, all you have to do is this, and then I'll feel better.
Correct.
Okay, now here's the thing. That's for her to clean up. But if you're going to be in a relationship with this woman, that's what it's going to be like. So either she cleans that up, or you cater to that behavior.
Sure. So like.
Well, wait a minute.
Progress and.
Wait a minute.
Okay. Sorry.
Sure. That felt like sure. So does that make sense, what I'm saying?
Yes.
Okay.
And there's more. Like this is a progressive story. So I have like multiple levels of questions because like we've talked about these things, and so like I'm here and she's actually seeing someone today, back in Chicago. So like we've realized that we have dysfunctions that we trigger each other in. Like I can see it. Like I trigger you in this way, and then you do something, and you trigger me back.
Yeah,
and it escalates.
it's child and teen. So basically you're bouncing back and forth. And like she'll be in a child place, then you'll be in a teen place. Then you'll be in a child place, and then she'll be in a teen place. That's what you're describing, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then, so at some points, it'll be, so for example, let's say she's in an emotional state, she's upset, and I guess I go into teen where like I just shut off the emotional thing.
Yeah, you close down.
And that makes her even more frustrated because I'm not reacting and she is.
No. You are reacting.
Am I?
Yes. How you're reacting is that she brings you all this emotion and she wants you to fix it. And you're like, I'm not doing that shit. And you close up. That is a reaction. It doesn't mean that a reaction is bad, though, or that you should feel ashamed of having a reaction. I just want you to know it's not she's having a reaction and I'm not. You're both reactive, and so how you're responding to her saying, fix my feelings, or basically take care of me in this way, is your teen is like, no. Because on some level, it's too hot.
Yes.
It's too, like, I can't do this. And the reality is like, you're not actually responsible for her feelings.
Well,
You're,
and it's not, and when I say that to her, she doesn't like that. That's not a good
well,
conversation.
no.
We're gonna fight, like, I'm not responsible for how you feel. It doesn't work well.
Well, but
by the
actually,
way.
well, I understand, but that actually is the truth. And so basically, like, what you're, and I don't mean this from a better than, but what you're dealing with is like an immaturity, where it's like, not because I'm not saying she's immature. I'm saying both of you have some immaturity around your emotional states, your boundaries, bouncing into these different things. And then what happens is we find a partner that actually does the same things. So we match up in ways where one's a child and one's a teen, and then it makes like a little match made in hell, basically. Because it's in an effort to work out however this issue is triggered. Like, she's triggered on safety, that triggers you around safety in the same way. It's just, it looks different, but you're having exposure when she's exposed. But then your teen shows up right away and closes it down. She doesn't move into a teen place. She's a little less functional in a way, because she doesn't move into the teen and be like, well, fine, I'm not going to bring this to him anymore. Because see, that's actually what would work better, is if you weren't able to meet that emotional kind of caretaking, it just wasn't right for you, for her to be like, well, then you're not the guy for me. But she won't do that because she's in a child place.
That's a whole different conversation.
But if, but listen, if she did that, then you know what would happen? You'd be like, wait, where are you going? I'm ready to deal with your feelings now.
Well, so
Because there's reactivity. We're not going to get into your entire relationship and spend all the time on all of it.
I don't want to either, not here in this specific form, but I would like to talk about this. I've seen
We can talk about
dysfunction, and it's like I can see it visually, like I can watch myself acting out dysfunctions,
That's good.
and I have challenges kind of interrupting the meta state of the chain of it, but like I can
That's
see
what
it
this
and
is
aware of
for.
it. So,
That's what this is for. So this is a lens to view that through, and then you're going to have a way to apply. You're going to have a method that you can then change how that's going, so that you could then move back into an adult place. But that's why I was really clear with you about, like, hey, you're still having a reaction. You're moving into closed. When you can move yourself from closed to protect and contain around her, and her asking you to meet her feelings and stuff, you may have a very different perspective. So one of the things is that this child state, these are like very limited polar states. So this child state is literally like a dirty filter. You're actually responding to the past. You're in the present, living in the past when you're in a child place. You're responding to past trauma. Whenever you're in a teen place, you're in the present, physically, but you're living in the future. So it's like this little bit of bandwidth. You're like either in the past or you're in the future. The adult state is the present moment. And it really is. When you spend some time in that state or move into it, you'll notice it. You see things very clearly, and your bandwidth goes from this to this. So you're in the present and you're able to make better choices. It is not rocket science. Because you move into an adult place, you're in the present again. You're going to make a better choice about your business, about your relationship, about your staff, whatever it is that you're looking to do. So, this conversation led me to that. Understand you're responding to stuff in the past, and you just have to fix that stuff. But then you may have a very different perspective about this woman or this person. You may want to be closer to her. You may decide I don't want to be around her at all. I don't know. But you did just go through a divorce, right?
again, this becomes a very sticky mess.
How long has it been?
conversation. I got separated in February.
Okay, so I mean, you probably have a bunch of stuff still going on around that.
Oh, for sure. And then.
So it's tricky to get involved with somebody
we
right now.
both kind of entangled, and both of us had strange, she had it's one of those things, right, kind of the attraction happened, and she was in a transition period, didn't have a job at this point, and was kind of going through her own thing.
Her own upheaval.
And then I was going through, this was probably 4 months after I got separated. So it's we kind of both met in this chaotic, transformational state, and so it was we have together made lots of progress in our own stuff, which is cool, but it's also, there's plenty of just weird, dysfunctional stuff that we do.
I'm going to say something to you that you're not going to like.
Oh yeah, okay.
you're not ready to enter into a new thing with someone, and this thing with this woman, you're bringing a bunch of stuff from the past into that relationship, and that's why you're having so many problems within it. I don't think that you should be doing it.
Fair enough.
Well, and part of why I said I don't know that you should be doing the relationship with her is that, whenever it's, no matter what the time frame is, I'm not even just saying how long it's been since your divorce, it feels like there's stuff going on with you that basically you cannot fix what failed the first marriage in the next one. And so it feels like there's a little bit of I'm kind of trying to redo some things and do them better, which is good, but I think you have to get that on board with yourself first before then you go try it out with somebody else. So I just wanted to clarify because it's a really big thing to say to you. I'm like, nope, don't do that. But it's because it's normal and it does feel that way. I'm not saying just with my head. It feels like you're bringing some stuff from the old marriage and kind of your feelings about that because it's like a little death. I mean, it's like a real hard thing for people. It feels like a failure. And then if we don't have a good boundary system, we internalize that as I am a failure.
Well, I want to talk about worth. I had that whole thing of me going back and basically, going back all the way back to me being a broken person that isn't worthy of love and isn't capable of it, and seeing all my mistakes and the ways that I screwed it up and all of that. And
it can be crushing. And so you're kind of still sifting through that stuff. This is going to give you a framework and a method to resolve those things, by the way, your relationship to the past marriage or relationship to your ex-wife. But that, I would suggest you do a little bit more resolution before you're trying to do something with somebody else. Because it's just too messy. And
very messy.
well, and you're not going to actually get there. People cannot, this is the other thing, you cannot go, okay, we're both having issues, let's go do this together. It doesn't work. Because what happens is you just start focusing on each other and kind of all the unresolved stuff you try to work out, but you don't have enough on board yet. I'm not saying you don't have anything on board. I'm just saying you need a little bit more.
I agree.
And then you'll be able to manage it better. And then maybe if you want to go back to this woman, Jen is her name? If you want to go back at that point, that might be best. I don't know. I don't want to get too up into it as far as what is the best thing for you to do, but I just know that there's some unresolved stuff that you're bringing into that relationship.
I'm well aware.
Okay, good. Well, good. Well, it's better worked out on your own is what I'm trying to tell you too.
Okay.
All right. So if I'm in a child place around my worth, I'm less than, right? Less than you. If I'm in a teen place, I'm better. If I move into an adult place, then I'm, again, the same equalness as you. All right? That's more of an ideal place. If I'm in a child place around safety, I'm all exposed, raw, and vulnerable. Okay? If I'm in a teen place around my safety, I'm all walled off and closed up. This is much better. This is relational. This is non-relational. This is too relational, basically. Okay? If I'm in a child place around the issue of perfection, then I am defective. So I feel and think that I'm defective and broken. So the word is defective. And again, it kind of requires an action. I'm either able or unable to do something. If I move into a defective place, then I think it's impossible. I'm broken. If I move into a teen place around perfection, I'm not defective and broken. I am perfect. And I demand it of myself and of you too. And that's what perfection is about. So I'm not defective, I think and try to be perfect. And like I already told you, it doesn't exist. Like it literally does not exist, all right? So you have to learn how to give it up. So if I'm in a teen place around perfection, I think I'm perfect and I demand it of myself and others, typically, if I'm in a teen place, all right? The idea is that you move over to be realistic. So you're gonna make mistakes, but that doesn't mean you are a mistake. That's the difference there, okay? So it's a more realistic viewpoint of this plane of existence, which is I'm not going to do everything perfectly well. There are things I'm going to be good at, things I'm not going to be as good at. There are things you're going to be good at and not as good at. But I have to be realistic about it. So it's like a balanced place. Does that make sense? Yeah.
It seems like the core issues of worth and perfection.
They inform each other
Are
directly.
corollary
They
to
are.
each
Very
other.
nice. So worth and perfection really inform each other very strongly. This one requires an action, but it has a direct feedback loop to worth. Safety and needs are actually highly correlated, which we haven't gotten needs yet, but those are really correlated too. So yeah, the perfection directly informs worth. Safety and needs are directly informing each other. All of them inform each other as well. But there is a real link between I can or can't do something, and then the worth things becomes very paramount.
And I would say it seems to me like the exact opposite would be true. Because I'm not worthy, there's nothing I can do about it. And I can't do anything about it, well then therefore that makes me worthy. It feels like they can.
Well, and so that's kind of, the thing is like, there's nothing I can do about it when the child's in charge, when this ego state is taken over. But typically the teen will show up and be like, no, I'm gonna make you perfect. Let's do perfect things to fix that problem, basically.
And then which also correlates perfectly, if I'm perfect, I'm also better than you.
Yes, you're gonna probably move into that. But I want you to know that whenever you, depending on the context and how you're triggered, it's possible to be in a less than and acting in a perfect way at the same time. Like you can be in any area depending on the triggering. Like in one context, like something happens, you notice that you're feeling better than, but you're also feeling very exposed. And then maybe you're also feeling defective, but maybe you're trying to be perfect. It depends on the context.
All around the same issue?
The same thing can create a different response depending on the context, meaning what the trigger is in the environment.
That would create righteousness, right? That less than with perfection, it's like, I'm not gonna stoop to your level.
Oh yeah, that actually would probably, if I'm not gonna stoop to your level, that's more of a better than. Like I'm not gonna stoop to your level. You would move into a better than at that point. Because the language is really important here. Like language is kind of like what, your feelings come from your thoughts. They're not magic. And so whatever language you're hearing is what you create. So the child and teen speak in certain languages. It's just these things, that's all that they can talk in.
So you apply the correction to whatever seems to be at the forefront, that might get knocked out, and then you're like, oh shit, there's this other one around the same subject, so you apply the correction to that one, and so forth and so on.
So sometimes sometimes you have 8 corrections to make if you're triggered in every box.
Got it.
Other times you have 2. Other times you have 4. Other times you have 1. It depends on how you're triggered, essentially, on those 4 core issues.
Good. Very nice.
Do a correction in one of those boxes, does it apply then to every area of your life? Do you have to do that for every kind of trigger?
Whatever context you made the correction in, that's where the most impact will be. But it does extrapolate over because you're at such a deep level. So basically, like, let's say you make a change around whatever one of those issues around work, it'll impact your personal relationships as well as relationship to your body, et cetera, but less so.
So you're basically saying that at max, you might have to do 8 corrections for every single area of your life.
Correct.
And then if they're less than perfect corrections, you might have to do them again and again.
There's no such thing as perfection.
No, because you said before that sometimes they resolve 100%, but most often they wouldn't.
Right, but I'm not going to use the language less than perfect because perfection doesn't exist.
Less than 100% then if you will.
What?
Less than 100% then if you will.
Yeah, exactly. But it would never be 100%, maybe less than 99. So defective, perfect, and then if I'm realistic about things, okay? Make sense? Yeah? All right. If I'm in a child place around my needs, then I am needy. Needy. So it's like an insatiable need that you can't fill up. I don't know if you guys ever experienced that, like where you've just been really, really needy. You were mentioning Coke. Coke creates that. Yeah, a lot of drugs they'll push you into the child around neediness as they wear off. And that's that, like, I have to do more. That's
the target core
of the needy components. Yeah, people trying to make sure they're okay.
Yeah, everybody's waiting for that dopamine device.
Yeah, because they're trying to increase this. So they get very much like this, trying to prove they're not this. And you're going to help me not be this way. And that is basically social media in a nutshell. It's a shit show. Like, it's terrible. And it's like any other new invention. It's all great for about 10 or 15 years, and then people start going, what is this doing? It happened with canned food in the 40s. For 20 years, canned food was the thing in America. It was like amazing that you could take food and you could vacuum seal it into tin cans that caused Alzheimer's, but you could can this food. It literally it revolutionized food and consumerism. And then after about 20 years, what happened in the mid-'80s especially, is in progressive environments, people are like, wait a minute, there's like stuff in this food. It's like not fresh and it's like leaching stuff into it. And all of a sudden, people were like, wait a minute, canned food is bad. Or at the very least, in America, we would say it's like ghetto or whatever. Like it's undesirable, right? The same thing's going to happen with social media. I'm not saying it's not going to be around, but the way that it's done is insane. It's making everybody nuts. And it's because everybody has these things going on, this polarity, and then you know what everybody's thinking and feeling because they tell you. You didn't used to know that someone was a racist or a classist or whatever. They were just your neighbor. Now you know all that stuff, and then it triggers people in these issues, and they start arguing with each other on social media. It's a pile of garbage. I don't recommend it at all. Okay, so if I'm in a child place around my needs, I'm all kinds of needy. If I'm in a teen place around my needs, I'm not needy, I'm needless. I don't need you. I don't need anybody. Get the fuck away from me, basically. And that is needlessness. So that's like an anti-dependency. This needy one is more of like a codependency, right? And then an interdependency, in other words, the kind of healthy way of relating, is that you are aware of what you want and need and can make it known. And I want you to add on there, and can make it known. So where it says aware of needs and wants, add on there, and can make it known, K-N-O-W-N. In other words, I can ask for it or let people know what it is. Yeah.
So would not suffering fools well fall underneath the needless?
Not suffering fools well? I know that phrase, but make the link for me to needless.
So having low tolerance, people...
That's more exposure.
Okay.
And so then you, there you go. Okay, good. All right, so quick recap, right? My worth, whether I'm worthy or not in any given moment, I can feel less than other people or better than other people, or I could be equal. When we get triggered, we move into these. Safety, I'm either exposed and flapping in the wind, or maybe I close up, or maybe some combination. People tend to bounce back and forth between them, actually. But that's going on, and then if I learn to protect and contain myself, I don't move into those places anymore. And that's about boundaries, and I'm going to do we're going to have like 3 hours on that tomorrow, okay? Or no, day 3. Oh, I got it that time. You would think that I'd know the order of what I do. But it's going to be on day 3, we'll do boundaries, all right? Perfection, I'm either defective and broken, or I'm perfect, okay? Unreachable standards is another way to think of perfection, and no standards is a way to think of defective. Just to give you a different lens, because I think that will also help you. All right? So if I'm realistic, then I'm in this adult place around that issue. Needs, I'm either needy or needless, or I'm aware and I can ask you to help me meet my needs or my wants. Your needs are actually for you to meet on your own, by the way. Your needs are for you to meet on your own. Your wants, you should go to other people for. It's a huge difference, okay? Everybody thinks that basically for like 40 years, everyone's been programmed through like therapy and marriage counseling books. Well, are your needs being met? Are they meeting your needs? No, that's not their job. Your needs are for you to meet on your own. That's what adults do. As far as like your wants, yeah, you should go to other people with your wants and have them help you with that, right? Like I want to make more money, so I'm going to go talk to my friend about what they're doing. Or I want to have a certain type of relationship with a woman or a man, so I'm going to go to you for what those wants are. I'd like you to do this, or can we help me with this? Those kinds of things. But your needs are for you to meet on your own. Okay? They're not supposed to be meeting your needs. People ruin really good relationships with this idea. Like, well, you're not meeting all my needs. It's like, well, go meet your own damn needs. And then let's kind of get together on other things. It's a very different relationship. And I'm not saying it's isolatory. I'm not trying to make you into little monks or something or isolate you. I'm telling you, that's how you get close to people. Because, yes, now you want to enrich and you want to grow and you want all these things to happen in the relationship instead of like, I'm all needy, need to fix the stuff that I didn't get from mom and dad, do it now. Or you know what, you're not acceptable to me anymore because you're not giving me what mom and dad didn't give me. It's essentially what a lot of people are saying without knowing it. Okay, so it seems like for the most part that everybody understands this, and everybody does understand it on some level, is what it seems like, okay? All right, so in your book, if you turn the page, you will see another way to kind of look at what I've been talking about. So in other words, that matrix is what you're going to use. That's your little guideline, your framework. It can be a lens to view the world too. Because as you start assessing yourself along those 4 core issues and kind of plotting yourself out, you'll start to categorize other people in that way as well. But you need to use your powers for good and not try to manipulate people because you know they're in a certain state. It is possible to move into manipulation of others with this work, but that's not what we do, okay? Now I do some corporate consultation around negotiation, tactic, and other things, but that's a little different and we're not manipulating, okay? But you can know a lot about a person if you start assessing yourself of where you are on those 4 core issues. You can then assess the person across from you and possibly speak accordingly, but don't manipulate. So right there, you can see like the wounded child, right? So will you read some of these for us? Like.
So in the ego state of the wounded child, you can have intense feelings, you experience an emotional regression. You can feel less worth and value than others. Like you can act immature, irresponsible, out of control. You can feel abandoned. You can be needy, insatiable, and feel wanting. You can feel bad, flawed, and have no standards. You can have no very damaged boundaries.
Very good, thank you. And so basically, like, that's just a little bit more words, a little bit more for you to understand beyond just like, you know, less than, defective, exposed. So this gives you a little bit more language to understand kind of what that ego state can feel like and what it's about. And then there's the teen one down there, and that's more like critical, attacking. Instead of feeling abandoned, you're abandoning, perhaps, of other people intentionally. But by the way, you can abandon an adult. So in other words, if you are having feelings of being abandoned, you are in a child state whole hog. You are in a child state. It's impossible to abandon an adult. You can abandon a child, and that's what happens whenever our needs aren't met. We feel abandoned. But if that gets re-engaged as an adult, understand that is your child, okay? Cannot abandon a grown-up, a chronological grown-up, okay. And then you'll see that there are some other words for the adult state. What are some of those? Why don't you read some of those for us?
Sorry, the adult state. Functional adult, recovery, self-love that is affirming, non-judgmental, nurturing, meets wants and needs appropriately, accountability and responsible, boundaries has shielded vulnerability, moderation and balance, humility, mature, creativity, interdependent, intimate, being present, creates safety.
Yeah. So it sounds pretty good. And those, and like that's more of what that state feels like and can afford you, basically. You know, this issue around perfection is also just about fallibility. So this thing about perfect is like an infallible state. It's this idea that you are not actually a human. So I just want to point out that this is like fallibility run wild, like where you feel like you're broken because of it, but this is more like, hey, I'm infallible. So there's no humility whenever we're in that place. The last thing I want to say is that these are the only things that the teen can do. There are no other options for him. The teen is the nature of the state whenever it takes over. The teen is better than. The teen is closed. The teen is perfect and is needless. That can't change. That's who he is or she is, and whenever you bounce into that place, that's what's going on. Same here. This is what the child is. The child is less than, exposed, defective, and needy. There's nothing inherently wrong with either one of them. It's just that they don't work very well whenever you're trying to live your life. And you're trying to construct a life that has balance or that you can express yourself more fully in whatever areas of life there are. So it's just a little bit more functional, a lot more functional, to learn how to move yourself over to here. And then you won't repeat the patterns you've already set. Because see, these things get kind of fixed. Like when something looks like a familiar trigger to us, we just bounce into one or the other and we don't even notice it. So what I want you to start to be able to do is to notice whenever you move into defective thinking or perfect thinking or standards or exposed, you kind of start to notice, and then you can apply a correction that you're going to learn on your last day. We're going to do a child and a teen correction on day 3. And so then you'll be able to have a living experience of what it looks like to make one, because we're going to use, one of you or 2 of you from here. So you'll have a way to work with yourself from there. Okay?